for? What are their ideas? What is their theme? What are they thinking about when asking you for a proposal, right? What is their focus? If they have rubrics, what does the rubric say? If you check the rubric beforehand, just like we do with our students when we share the rubric with them, we are setting them up for success. Same thing with a proposal writing. If there is a rubric available, then that's setting you up for success if you look at it ahead of time. And then what are the limitations? Like, what are things you should not talk about or you should not discuss because it's outside of the focus of the conference? And what is the added value that you will bring? So there are many things in our field that will bring added value to different conferences. So you need to make sure that you understand what is it that you are bringing that will be valuable to this conference and to the participants that attend that conference. So that's important to keep in mind as like your foundation when you are writing your conference proposal. Now, what are the parts of a proposal? So I have divided the parts of a proposal in two parts, like the main parts, which are usually the most challenging, and that is the title. Depending on the conference that you are writing a proposal for, they will have a limit of words. Some conferences might ask you for 5 words as a limit in the title. Some will ask you for 8. Some will ask you for 10. As you will see in our discussion, the key aspect when we are writing the title is that in itself, the title should tell the participants what your session is about. And we will see some examples about those. And it should be interesting, it should be motivating, it should entice people and make them curious. They want to know more when they read your title. So it doesn't matter if it's only 2 words or 5 words or 10 words, which is usually the maximum for a title. It has to be something that motivates people to go to your session just by reading the title. Then you have the abstract. And abstracts are written in such a way in which you will need to make sure that it summarizes specifically what you are going to deliver in your session, but in not a lot of words. Normally, we have different lengths for abstracts. It could be 30 words, it could be 40 words, it could be 50 words, and I have seen some conferences that allow 100 words. Normally, the average is 50 words. For example, for international conferences that I've been to, they ask you for an abstract of 50 words. 50. And that means that in those 50 words, that you might think that's a lot of words, but then when you start writing, it's not a lot of words. But in those 50 words, you have to be able to say exactly what you are going to deliver in that session. So it has to be, you have to write it very strategically, because in those 50 words, you need to tell your participants what are you going to be talking about. Then we have the description. The description also varies in lengths. It depends on the conference that you are applying to. Some descriptions some conference organizers might ask for 100 words, some for 150, 200, 300 words I have seen as the maximum. And that's a good number of words for you to give more details. So usually you have your abstract that summarizes what is going to happen in your session, but in your description, you are allowed to go into more detail, and you're going to see a little bit of what the detail entails. But you need to make sure that in your description, you're not only touching on the important aspects of the evidence of your work and what you're going to share, but you also need to be able to describe sort of step by step what will happen in your session and what your participants will take away from that session. So why is it important for somebody to attend your session? What are they going to go away? It can be a strategy, it can be materials that they can use right away in their classroom, or it can be ideas that they could adapt to their own context. But you need to make it explicit in your description and a little bit in your abstract, but in your description you need to make it explicit that the participants will go away with something specific. So that's really important, and it's something that you need to keep in mind when writing that description. And we're going to see examples of descriptions so you can have an idea of how that works. Then we have other parts of the proposal which are equally important, but usually are not that challenging, and that is choosing your presentation. Do you want to present on research, a research-oriented presentation? Do you want, and this is based on something that you have done in the classroom through a quantitative method or action research that you want to share, and you present it as such, research. It can be a colloquium where you have invited speakers, or a panel where you have invited speakers that are going to present on different perspectives of a topic. Then you're going to invite others to share that stage with you. It can be a teaching tip, and those usually are short sessions in which you share something that worked for you, like using images to teach vocabulary, or using music to develop grammar, or the use of or incorporating gamification to create motivation, right? So it could be a teaching tip. You can also have poster sessions where it's sort of a walking gallery where people go around and look at the different posters and talk to the speakers. That's another type of presentation. And usually the type of presentation will be connected to the topic that you are sharing. So not all types of presentations will be appropriate for all topics, right? You need to keep that in mind when you are developing your proposal. Which type of presentation will suit best what you want to do? If it is a demonstration, for example, and you want to show how to specifically use music to develop listening skills, for example, you actually are going to demonstrate. If it is going to be a workshop, it's going to be a hands-on experience where people are going to actually be doing something. So you see, depending on your topic, the type of presentation will vary. So it is important to consider what exactly you want to share and how you want participants to be involved in that presentation. Then you have your content areas, whether it is for EFL, whether it is for reading, for listening, for the use of video, for computer-assisted language learning, different content areas. Also, in some conferences, like for example in TESOL International, we have the strands, and we have around 10 strands, and they are around teacher education, adult education, personal professional development, applied in linguistics, so those huge topics, right? And then people choose which strand their topic belongs to. Then who is going to be your audience? And this is really important because then you're going to tailor your examples to that particular audience. And there are presentations that we do that are for all audiences. For example, right now, this presentation is for everybody, right? All audiences. If you're teaching in primary, in secondary, if you teach adults, if you teach in higher education, if you do teacher training, everybody can attend this conference and get something out of it. But there are some presentations that will be very specific, that are examples only useful for primary education or for pre-primary education or only for secondary students or only for, so that depends. So you need to be very careful in understanding who is your target audience. Because if you say, for example, that your audience is secondary, and you give examples about primary, then it's not going to be very relevant for your audience, right? So we need to be very careful when selecting our audience. Also, number of participants. And number of participants is important because if you are doing a workshop, for example, and you select that you want 150 people, a workshop with 150 people, it's not impossible, but it's kind of difficult, right? And if you do it online, it's a little bit more difficult also. So you need to be careful to say, okay, if I'm going to do a workshop, I want a limit of 50 people. If I'm going to do a teaching tip, then I can have 200 people and everybody's going to benefit equally. If I'm going to do a poster, 200 people is okay as well. So it depends again on your type of session. So whenever you are choosing these parts in your proposal, which is usually common in the call for proposals that conferences send out, you need to keep you need to keep that in mind when you are making those selections, that it is appropriate for what you select there. And then after you submit your proposal, if you're going to make changes, you make sure that those changes are not very drastic. They need to be simple changes just to make certain adaptations. But then you need to keep in mind what you already sent as your conference proposal. Let's look at some tips and tricks and strategies. And like I said at the beginning, review what you need from the call for proposals. So usually call for proposals come in different ways. They can either come with a form, they can either come through a checklist. People now are using a lot of Google Docs, and they tell you at the beginning, this is the conference, this is the focus, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to prepare. So a strategy that Becker recommends, and that I highly recommend as well, is prepare everything that you are going to need in your computer first in a Word document or in a series of documents. And that means write your title, your abstract, your description, make your selection of audience, type of presentations in a separate document before putting it into the form. Why? Because you can check whether you have everything that you need before going into the form. What happens sometimes if we go into the form directly? They're going to ask us for something that we really don't have. That means that we need to close the form, go back, and start preparing again. So that is a waste of time for us, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to be ready with everything that they ask beforehand, so that when you are ready to fill out that form, you have everything that you need. Then choosing your focus. So let's say that you have a theme for a conference. I recently delivered a session at a conference that talked about building bridges. Okay, so they want to know about, that's the theme of the conference, building bridges. What is it that you have in your experience that can address that theme? The topic of your presentation doesn't have to be the same as the theme, but it has to connect with the theme somehow. So what have you done in your classroom to build bridges? For example, there's an activity that you did to bring together you have students from multicultural contexts, for example, and you brought together their traditions, their customs into a particular activity. So that could be something related to building bridges, right? Or you maybe had a project with a teacher in another institution that was very successful and helped your students learn about problem solving. That could be something related to building bridges as well. Or you did something internationally. That definitely talks about building bridges, right? So whatever has helped you and your students do something to build bridges, that would be a good focus for that presentation. Sometimes, for that convention, sorry. Sometimes we see convention topics that are not related to something that we have done, but usually convention organizers tell you, these are the lines we are looking for. However, it doesn't mean that we're not going to accept something that is different. So that means that you might not have something within their guidelines, but you can send something that is truly relevant for the field, and it might get accepted as well. So you need to make sure that you read carefully their guidelines. But usually, convention organizers want to see something that connects to their theme and to the topics that they are interested in. This is very important, and I like this recommendation from Becker, and this is true for every type of writing that we do, not only for proposal writing. When we are writing articles for newsletters, when we are writing articles for journals, and especially when we write articles for journals, we have somebody review that for us, right? We have the editors. But it is important to have somebody that you trust, that it's your peer, your colleague, that can actually read your proposal before submitting. Why is this important, and why is this an act of being humble and being a good learner as a teacher? Because sometimes as writers, we write something and we look at it and we say, I think it's okay. But when somebody else reads it, it doesn't make sense to them. So this is why it's very helpful to ask your colleague or to ask your peers to read your proposal beforehand, because they will give you the outside perspective of a reader, of a potential participant that will read your abstract, or a proposal reviewer that will read your description, and they will say, I don't understand what they are trying to say with this session. What is their message? So having one peer or two or three peers read your proposal beforehand, and it has to be something that you trust. It has to be something that you respect in the field and that you respect as a mentor, maybe, or that you respect as them being an authority in the topic that you're suggesting, or in writing in general. So it has to be a person that has those characteristics. And it can be your peer, your colleague, or it can be a supervisor. It depends on your context. But having those outside perspectives definitely helps your proposal be more solid and helps you be more confident about what you are submitting to that convention. So it's important. And if you see in the example of the visual, this is about abstracts for journals or for research, but it gives you a clear idea of what an structured abstract looks like and what unstructured is. And that is, when we have a structured abstract or description, it is clear. We can understand exactly what the writer or what the potential presenter is trying to tell us. When it is unstructured, it is difficult. You need to do a little bit more. You need to read it several times to actually understand it. And when we are submitting proposals for conferences, we want our title, our abstract, our descriptions to be so clear, straight away, right away, so that the reviewers say, oh, I understand what this presenter is trying to say. This is a proposal that we will accept for our conference, right? It has to be clear, straightforward, right to the point. So keep that in mind when writing your proposals. And I like the suggestions from Backer that she makes in her blog post. Then we have a conversation that Pyant and Hardy had in 2016, and that is also a TESOL blog. And they defined 10 things that we need to take into consideration in our abstracts and descriptions and conference proposals. And they mentioned 10 things. One is territory, and that is defining the context where this is happening. It can be multi-level classroom. It can be a low-income context. It can be a high-resource classroom. It can be a situation where English is not the second language, but it's like the third or fourth language, right? We need to establish where is this strategy, or where is this research, or where is this thing that we want to share happening? What is the context of this activity we want to share? Then, very important, and it's very important for us as teachers, and we teach this to our students constantly, we need to report, or we need to cite on previous research. What is informing what we are doing in the classroom? What did we read that really told us that trying games, that trying visuals, that trying music is really a good strategy to use in the classroom, right? We need to cite that research, and we need to mention that, especially in our description. But there also could be a gap. There's a lot of research about using music. There's a lot of research about using visuals. There's a lot of research about incorporating gamification. But what if there is a gap about what works in, for example, if I'm thinking about Honduras, how to use technology in a low-income context where people don't have access to technology, right? There might be gaps in those areas. Or if I think about the Latin American region in general, I might say there are many gaps in research regarding English teaching, especially in Central America. How can I contribute with my session to bridge that gap, to close that gap? So I can also present something that has not been researched and say that there's research about this, but nothing about this. So I want to present my proposal because it's going to close that gap. Also, what is your goal? Why do you want to share this? And Ayub was telling me something very interesting at the beginning when he was saying the teachers have been part of the open program. Some are going to be part of the open program. They have learned a lot of strategies, about techniques, a lot of methods to implement in the classroom. They have a lot of knowledge, and it is important that they share it. So this is the goal for this conference, that you share what you have learned so that others can benefit from that opportunity that you have had being part of the open programs. And open programs are great, by the way. I just love them. And another thing is, what are you going to do? And this is important. What is first is, what did you do in your classroom? Sorry. What did you do in your classroom? How did this methodology work? How did you plan it? And what were the tasks that you implemented? And then we have, what are you going to do in the presentation to show what you did in the classroom, right? So two different things. First, describe what you did in your classroom and how that worked for you. And then what are you going to do with participants in the session to tell them about your experience and also tell them how they can work this out in their classroom. Something that is usual when we are delivering webinars and when we are delivering sessions is that people say, yes, but that works in your context because you were able to do it because you have this and this and that resource, but that will never work in my context. And no, I will not do it. So we need to be ready as presenters to say, yes, this worked in my context. Somebody needs to mute them. Okay. So this, I can say, yes, this worked in my context because I have these things in place, but a potential adaptation to your context could be X, Y, and Z. So we need to be ready to tell people, if you try it, it will work. What I have learned in my experience in delivering sessions and being part as a participant in sessions is that everything is adaptable. We just need to be creative. And creativity is something we teachers have. And I know you all have a lot of creativity and come up with great ideas in your classroom. So we should never say, that would not work for me. We should say, how can I adapt that to my classroom with my students, right? That should be our mindset. Also, what are your outcomes? So what do you want to gain from this presentation? What is going to be beneficial for those who attend? And how is this going to benefit you? And it can benefit you in many ways. For example, in our country, I don't know in your country, and you can tell me about this in the chat if you want. But for our teachers, if they present at sessions, they get credits with the Ministry of Education, and that is good for their tenure in teaching. Also, if you get a certificate that you presented, that is also points for you with the Ministry of Education. So there can be many benefits, but also what are the benefits for those who participate, right? Because we want to hear from those who participate in our session, I used the strategy that you recommended and it worked very well. That's usually very rewarding for us as presenters. And then, how is this important, right? Why people need to use this? Because it's part of what we're doing now in the field. And remembering that our field is very, evolves constantly and changes constantly. And then competence. And this means, are you prepared to do this? And usually, if you have experienced it in your classroom, then you are prepared to do this. And with this, what I'm trying to say is, don't think that you need to be a person who has written 15 books and has written in 25 journals and who has been a president of something to share in a conference. As long as you have tried it in your classroom, it has worked, you have been reflective of the process, and you are knowledgeable in that area, you can present at a conference. So don't let those big names or big curriculums demotivate you. Make sure that you feel confident that what you are doing and what you are working on will really help other people, because we have everybody has experiences that will be helpful to others, and if we don't share them, then other people will not benefit. So don't feel demotivated and don't say, no, presenting at conferences is for big names and I am not a big name. we all of us started as not being a big name, and we decided to do this because we wanted to share with others. So forget about big names and those things. Other suggestions, and I like these suggestions from McVeigh because he asks us to ask ourselves two questions. What do you want to accomplish with your session? What is it that you want to do? Again, sharing, uh, closing a gap in research, or letting others know about your experience so they can adapt it. And who do you want to share this information with? This is your audience, right? Everybody, primary teachers, secondary education, adult education, teacher trainers. Then plan the right level of specificity. So don't leave the topic, the abstract, or the description too general or too narrow. You need to find a balance. Give the right amount of information that is needed for a proposal reviewer to actually understand what you are trying to do and get that proposal accepted. Show your scholarship, and this has to do with research, right? Let's share the research that really gives the evidence that we are doing this based on research. Again, same as Backer, he says, prepare ahead of time, right? Organize exactly what will happen and how you will describe that. And then have others review. That is very important. And you see, we have two people that are emphasizing this, and I would be a third people to tell you, every time that I write something, I run it by somebody else. And I usually run it by 2 or 3 people because that way I get different perspectives. And that really helps to craft very good writing and a very solid proposal. Now, what are common mistakes? And I was telling you about this when I was talking to you about audience. So sometimes we choose the incorrect audience, and then even if our topic is really good, it might not get accepted, or if it gets accepted and we go into the actual session, then our attendees are not going to be very interested because it's not going to be meaningful for them. So make sure that you select the correct audience. Also, the relevance of topic for the field. So, for example, when we do conferences in Honduras, it's completely different when we prepare proposals for international conferences because the interests of our teachers in Honduras are different from those at the international level. So something that might work at our local level might not work internationally. So we need to keep that in mind. Your expertise, and this goes back to what I was saying. How are you an expert in this area? And I don't mean how are you a big name in this area. I mean, how much have you validated this in your classroom to make sure that it works? So you have used it, let's say for one semester, you have used music to improve grammar and you have seen the benefits of it, then you have that expertise. So it's worth sharing. Or lack of evidence in the topics. You don't show how it connects to research. So that could be a common mistake to get your proposal not accepted, or to have a very weak foundation of that presentation when you actually present it if it gets accepted. If you don't do a well-prepared description, where you don't include research, where you don't say what was your experience with this method or how did you come about the information, and you don't say what participants are going to get from it, or not following the guidelines. That will be a complete non-accepted proposal in an international conference if you don't follow the guidelines of the conference. So keeping those common mistakes in mind, that's helpful. And if we go to my experience, what have I done? So I have presented locally, regionally, and internationally since 2007. And one strategy that I used that worked for me was reading many abstracts and descriptions from other people. So if you look at examples from conference programs that you go to and you see, interesting abstract, and you read another and you start comparing you start learning about what abstracts look like and then descriptions, you can read them if you become a proposal reviewer for your conference, for example, or for an international conference. For example, I am a member of TESOL International, and I usually volunteer to read proposals because when I review proposals for the conference, I am learning. I'm not only volunteering my service to TESOL, I am also benefiting by learning about different people from different parts of the world who are sending their proposals and giving me ideas on what a good description, what a good abstract would look like. I usually try to look at the whole abstract of description, but I also divide it into parts. And I see, okay, this abstract has these different parts. Interesting how they put this idea together. So I dissect all the parts. And then I try to replicate, not copy. That's different. But replicate the strategy on how they did the work, right? Because those are two different things, copying and replicating the pattern. And then I usually prepare ahead of time. Usually conferences give you around 6 to 8 weeks to send your proposals. Some conferences offer 3 months. But when the call for proposals is out, if you are interested in actually thinking of going to that conference, you should take a look at their checklist, their guidelines, their rubrics, and prepare the materials ahead of time, then write it, leave it for 1 week, go back to it, and evaluate it yourself. Just like we tell our students to self-evaluate, we should do the same with our proposals, right? You self-evaluate, use the rubric and grade it yourself, have somebody else read it and grade it with the rubric to see if it's a solid proposal, right? So that has helped me. So this would be my particular tips in addition to what Backer, Hardy, and McVeigh have said about tips and tricks. Now let's get into practice, because I wanted this to be a part where you are actually looking at things. And what I want to do in this last part is I want to practice. And what I have done is I have selected the main parts of proposals. So let's look at these titles first. And you will see that we have there 8 different titles. And in the chat, I want you to give me comments about these titles. You will notice that we have titles with 10 words, with 9 words, with 7 words, with 2 words. But I want you to read through them and give me characteristics. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write in the chat and give me characteristics of these titles. What do you think about these titles? What do these titles tell you? If you have to describe them, what would you say they look like? And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think and write in the chat.
Thank you, Grazzia. I think you're still thinking. So guys, put your answers in the chat box.
No problem. Yeah. They have 2 minutes to read and write, so we're going to give them that waiting time. Okay, very good, Grace. Some are clear, some are not. They aim to expose a very specific issue. Ayub, thank you. The titles are so interesting. Thank you. They specifically provide clear information. Yes. they show outcome, right? From the beginning. They're also trying to spark curiosity because, for example, when I read an awakening in in-service teacher training for English language learners, that word, an awakening, makes me kind of curious. So I really would be motivated to go to this session because I would say, what are they doing that is awakening in-service teacher training, right? Okay, some are not very specific. The word limits, the words are limited with great meaning. Okay, some titles are long, others are short. The first one looks so workable, yes, and very, it sparks your curiosity, right? Some are clear, yes, some will require extra experience to understand exactly. That's very good of you to say. Some would require that people really know what they're talking about. For example, calling ESL. You would have to have experience in computer assisted language learning to actually understand what they are talking about. They include numbers, some of them include numbers. The clear ones, they focus on content. Very good. Thank you. I can say they give us the clear picture on what is it. Very good. So yeah, so you see from the get-go, from the title, that means that you need to be creative with your title. And then Omega says some are clear, but others need a bit of clarification. Yes, and that connects, Omega, with what Ayub was saying. For some, teachers might need to have a little bit more experience on some topics to actually understand them. So that gives you another recommendation. Make sure that if you are, depending on the type of conference that you're going to, that your title will be clear enough, if that is your objective, for everybody that reads it, right? Be it a novice teacher or a veteran teacher, it doesn't matter. So you need to make sure that it is clear for everybody. And then, for example, when you read the 6 enduring principles of learning, I think teaching for radical change, I would find that also interesting because I would say, okay, they're going to give me 6 guidelines where I will actually make change in my classroom, right? So it's interesting, create suspense, exactly. Mostly need more clarification in some of them. Very good. And the title would be one piece. Maybe you will get clarification when we read abstracts, right? For this particular titles. So, but what I wanted to show you with this exercise is that titles are really an important piece of your conference proposal. And the way you write them in that limited amount of words that you might get has to actually spark curiosity from those who will attend your session. Because sometimes not everybody will read the abstract. Some people will just decide to go to a session based on the title. So your title is really important when you're writing a proposal. Okay, let's move to exercise 2, abstracts. And I want you to read, I think we have 2 slides on abstracts, yes. We're going to read 4 different abstracts. You're going to see that they are different lengths, but I want you to identify those parts that I was talking about at the beginning, okay? When I told you sets the stage, then talks about a little bit of the research, and then what participants get. So let's read these 2 first, and then decide if they have those parts that we are looking for. Yeah, I like that one idea. They encourage critical thinking, right? And that's important also. We want to encourage critical thinking in teachers as well. Okay, so let's look at these abstracts for 2 minutes also and decide what we think about them. What do you think about this abstract? Let's talk about abstract 1. So it's telling us about computer-assisted language learning, right? And if we don't know a lot about that, That will be difficult for some of us if we haven't read about it. That would mean that if we wanted to make a choice to attend this session, we would have to first research what computer-assisted language learning is. Although for very experienced teachers, then this would not be foreign. They would understand it. But I want you to notice two things in the questions. How can ESL teachers distinguish between ineffective and effective call activities? And how does culture influence call? What are those two questions telling you about this session? What do you think they're telling you about the session? Because in the abstract, they don't tell you what participants will go away with. They end the abstract with two questions. So what do you think the questions tell you? They're telling you what the participants will go away with, right? In the form of a question. Because they're saying, if we translated this or if we interpreted this, it would be participants will leave the session with differentiation of what are effective and ineffective call activities and how call is influenced by culture, right? So this is another way of saying in your abstract what the participants will go away with. Yeah, the challenges teachers and students experience in the computer class. Yeah, the meaning of effective and ineffective activities. Exactly. So it doesn't tell you directly participants will live with this, but the questions, when you interpret them, then they tell you what participants will live with. Then in the other example, if you notice, they begin by setting the foundation of the session, and then in the end of the abstract, it says, the workshop presents the strategies for creating reasonable, right? So that is what the participants will live with, right? Strategies to create reasonable writing assignments, assessing assignments, and providing accessible minimal feedback. So these are more sophisticated abstracts where people don't directly say what participants will live with. They do it in a different way. Okay, let's look at other abstracts that in the words. Here we have 55 words, here we have 48 words. What do you think would happen with abstract 1 that has 55 words? Yeah, when reading, thank you, dear gracious. When reading the first abstract, one is encouraged to carefully go through the content since answers to the questions are found there. Exactly. The questions show the objectives. Thank you, Lydia. So in these two abstracts, let's look at the words. 55 words, 48 words. If a proposal reviewer looked at the words, which of this would most likely get accepted? Number 1 or number 2? Because the usual limit for abstracts is 50. Which one would most likely get accepted? Number 2, right? Because it doesn't go beyond the number of words. If it were for an abstract that's 100 words, yes, both of them. But if it, and what happens is, and for example, in international conferences, they don't give you an open form. They give you a platform where once you reach the 50 words, the paragraph is cut. So for example, this abstract in a platform for an international conference will have the 5 last words cut off. And then if that proposal is sent like that, that would disqualify that proposal because the abstract would not be clear. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind when we are doing this, the aspect of proposal writing. And if you see here, they talk to you about the objectives, okay, and they tell you what the participants are going to learn. They don't actually mention participants. In number one, yes, engage participants in analysis of teacher change. But in number two, they're talking to you about the participants will learn what makes adult learners persist, about the central nature of teacher-student relationship, right? So these are four examples of abstracts, and Irene has a presentation, so she will share with you these examples. These are real examples, real titles, real abstracts, and real descriptions from past conference programs from TESOL International Association. So these are abstracts that have been accepted to international conferences. So it is good that you have this resource. Like I told you, from my experience, what I do is I dissect and look at the parts and understand how other writers do it, because that's how I learn also. Now let's look at this description. So this section is about description. And if you notice this description, most of that description is based on questions. Why do some students in our TESOL and applied linguistic classes participate in discussions and other not? Do native speakers dominate the discussion and the non-native speakers take a back seat? So the topic of this is native and non-native speakers, and I don't like that term. We are now moving into L1, L2 proficiency speakers because it's a little bit more inclusive and less discriminative. Is it because students from different cultural backgrounds prefer different teaching approaches or other reasons? And then, so what the presenters did here is they started using questions to set the stage. Like somebody said, because it helps you engage in that critical thinking piece, right? Then they move on saying, the session will explain the experience from the presenters in X, Y, and Z. They will share the experiences that they have used in their own classes, right? And the impact that this has caused. And then finally, they end by saying the participants will live with new tools, new ideas that they can use in their own courses. So they set the stage with questions. Now, if you looked at it from the perspective of what I have told you, what would this description be missing? That is necessary. Remember, we mentioned that as a recommendation and a strategy for writing descriptions. What would this description be missing? It sets the stage. It talks about means one and means two. It tells what would be the takeaway for participants. But what are they not saying too explicitly? Or what would be missing? And if it's in a rubric, we would grade it with a low grade. It's missing the research, right? Where is the evidence that backs up these strategies or these methods that were used in the classes of these presenters? We don't see that. It's kind of touched upon through the questions, but it's not very evident, right? And if it, exactly, lack of evidence. So, and if it were that the rubric for this, the citation, exactly, and if it were that the rubric for this conference required that the description have citations and the research that backs up the session, then maybe this description will make data is very important, exactly. And what happens is this would be a proposal that might not get accepted. So to be on the safe side, let's always include those citations that really back up what we are doing in our classrooms, or mention that there is no research around this, right? And mention that there is research on X and Y, but there's research missing on this, and that's why we want to present this. So both scenarios work. And then we have this one that has 296 words. And if you see, it has a wealth of research. I would say that it has a little bit too much research. But since what they are presenting is a model, it is important to have that research. But again, it sets the stage, it gives you the research, then it tells you what they have done in the classroom. Then they tell you what the presentation will describe or what will happen in the presentation, that there will be an analysis of the model, and then that is the takeaway of the participants. So you see, these are different examples. And if you go to past conference programs, from different conferences, you are able to get examples. And I have more examples that I can share with you, and you just need to write an email to me so that it can share examples with you. That would not be a problem. But these, I found that these were very relevant examples that you could take a look at to understand what an abstract, what a title, what a description should look like. Then, things to remember from today's sessions, because I think my time is really up. I went overboard. Plan ahead of time. Make sure you share it with someone, another pair of eyes, another perspective. Choose the research that supports not only the work in your classroom, but your proposal. Check the rubric, check the guidelines. Make your own checklist. And sometimes TESOL has now done a checklist for people to check their work. I find that valuable. Not all conference organizers provide that. So if they don't provide it for you, make your own checklist to make sure that you're including everything that is requested in the rubric and in the guidelines. Review other abstract and descriptions, just like we did today. Go through it, underline what is happening in that abstract, in that description. And again, have others review your work. So share it, but have others actually edit it. Have people cross things for you, tell you to move things around. That is helpful too. So have people edit your work. Join TESOL. That's a great place to learn more. We have great communities of practice. If you don't want to pay for the membership, you can explore mytesol.org, and then you have access to some free stuff. But I would encourage you to join it. There's a huge network of local affiliates and associations that you can benefit from. And if you have questions, and if we have time for those, Irene, I am ready for those. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much. Yeah. At least you got to see my face. So guys, if you have any question,
Yes.
put them in the chat box. While we're waiting for questions, we missed one thing, Grazzia. I have reviewed about 3 conferences proposals right now, 3 conferences, annual conferences, and most of the presenters, I can say, lacks the knowledge of writing biography. So if you can talk a little bit about that as well, since we've talked about abstracts, title, and description. If we can talk about just a little bit.
So for writing bios, it also depends on conference organizers. Some of them give you, again, 100 words, so you can write your whole curriculum there. Some give you only 50 words, so that means a reduced amount of time. So what you want to say is where you are currently working, what is your role in that place. Like, for example, I am an education specialist at USAID Honduras. What are your credentials? That mean your degrees, right? What is your experience? How many years of experience? In what areas you have that experience? If you have been awarded something in particular that is an international recognition, maybe. And then what are your research interests? So I would say those are the 4 to 5 elements that a bio should have. Again, if it's only 50 words, you need to reduce that. If it's 100 words, then you have a little bit more space. But usually your experience, what's your current position and what you do, what has been your experience, and how long have you been serving on the field? I would say those are the key parts of a biography.
Thank you so much. Well, I don't see questions. Guys, if you have questions, just write in the chat box. You can also speak up
You
if you
face a
want to
challenge on
speak.
how to write citation. Okay. So to write citations, usually in citations, we use the APA system. So a tip and trick is using Word. Word gives you in the menu a section for references, and in references they give you you say insert citation, and you choose if you want to do APA, MLA, and depending on the conference, but it's usually APA. And then you click on that, and then you open, if you're going to cite a book, if you're going to cite an article, if you're going to cite a movie, you choose there in the menu, and then you only write the information they ask you. Then you insert your bibliography directly, and then Word does it for you. So that would be a trick that I would share with you to make it easier, because you can memorize the whole APA guidelines, but Word makes it easy for you. Is it necessary to write a resume in your bio? No, you shouldn't write your resume in your bio. Your bio should be a short summary of who you are, your experience, and what you do. Yeah. Some of the conferences want a paper after the conference. Can you talk about that? Yes, Ayub. Those are conference proceedings, and it's usually a summary of the session that you delivered at the conference that will be published in a document for the conference. For example, I just recently delivered in April 2 sessions with Korea TESOL, and they asked me to write for their conferences proceedings. So what I am writing for them is a brief summary, like a short article on my session, the experiences, the research, and then that's going to be, and usually conference organizers give you the guidelines also. So everything is about the guidelines that the organizers give you, and you need to follow those. So they tell you how they want to write it, the type of font, the size that you have to use, and what you need to include in that article. So those are the conference proceedings. Yes. Which
Can
is
you take a
recommended,
hand?
structured as yes. So Dr. Lydia says, which is recommended is structured. Structured. You want structured because you want people to understand what you are writing right away. Yes, and we have Juliana who has her hand up.
Yeah, Juliana, you can unmute yourself. I know you can do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, madam. Thank you so much for the nice presentation. Of course, though I just joined late, but yes, I got something. And okay, my question is, I want to know about, does a less number of participants can you trigger the confidence of a speaker?
You mean,
example, if a speaker expects maybe to have 100 people in the hall, then again at the end he just or she just meet with like 15, 20 person.
well, you can feel bad if you were expecting 100, then you're not going to be very happy that you only got 10, right? But what I can tell you is, and from my experience in attending different types of conferences all over the world is, for example, even if they don't think your topic is interesting, they will stay. That's part of our culture. We stay out of respect because we feel that is disrespectful that we got into your conference and then we leave 10 minutes after, right? But that depends. And conferences that I have been in Europe, it's the same. Some people stay, some people leave. So I would say if you were expecting 100 and only 10 arrive, that's a good thing. That means those 10 people are interested in what you have to say. And don't get away your confidence. Just go ahead and deliver your session and be happy that 10 people will hear what you're doing.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. But sorry, I have another question. Okay, I have just written the proposal, of course, regarding the, okay, I just, I'm my champion, SDG number 4, Innovation Champion 2022. So they just ask us to write, a proposal. And in my proposal, especially this, they ask us to, to write a problem statement. And then my problem statement, I didn't put the data. Does it affect maybe, how can I say, will that affect the beautiful, or how the problem statement looks like maybe on before their eyes?
So it will depend, and this goes back again to the checklist that the conference organizers provide, the rubric that they provide. If that was a requirement, it will affect the proposal and how proposal reviewers read it. If that was not required, then it may or may not. So it all depends on what the conference organizers are looking for in the submission of that proposal. It all depends on that. So that's why I emphasize the importance of checking those rubrics, checking the guidelines, because that tells you what is required and what you can leave out.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ayub says here, share experience with us on how we can get teachers motivated to write for the conference benefits and why it's important. Oh yeah, I have an answer for that. So presenting at a conference, even if you are scared the first time is very important. I remember my first time in 2007. I was very scared to go to TESOL International. I had never done that before, and I was doing it with a colleague, but I was very nervous. But let me tell you that if I had not done that, I would not be here talking to you today, because that was like the door that opened for me this world of TESOL that I am in love with. So the benefits is you grow as a professional, you get to meet people from all over the world, from other institutions, from different places. You get to engage in projects. You get to learn your brain perspective like broadens incredibly. So I would say that for me has been the greatest benefit. And I would not change it for the world. So if you are a little bit nervous, it's okay to be nervous. I get nervous every time I'm going to give a presentation, like the first 2 minutes, because I don't know what's going to happen. But after those 2 minutes, the nerves go away, and you are doing as many things that people are interested in learning about. So yes, it's okay to be nervous, but don't decide not to do it just because you're nervous. And then Aiden says, can an abstract go beyond the page? That depends. So an abstract usually is 50 words. Some conference organizers give you 100 words, but the normal average is only 50 words, so it will not go beyond the page. And then Sergalo says, I'm getting confused. What's the difference between proposal and an article? Okay, so right now what we're talking about is conference proposals to present a session in a conference. And then when you talk about an article, it could be an article for a journal. And like Ayub was saying, when you deliver a session, like for example, if today we're a conference and not a webinar, and the organizers tell me, Gracia, now that we have finished the conference, we want you to write for the conference proceedings, write an article on your session, then I would write Regalos. And Claudia, that had the same question. Yes. So I think those were all the questions, Irene. Thank you, Juliana. No, don't envy me. Just send your proposal and then we can work together sometime. Irene can share
Thank you
with
very
you a
much,
lot of experiences she
Gracia.
has had. Yes.
Well, I don't see
Yeah, I really
questions.
appreciate. Thank you very much for your presentation today. That was a great.
You're muted.
Yeah, I wanted to say first, thank you very much, Gracia. That was a great presentation. It was an eye-opening because we normally do the writing and so forth, but now we understand when you write a proposal and you don't get selected, we know where we did not do it right. So thank you for opening us, enlightening us on all these aspects. I am positive that in the near future, once we announce for conference proposal writing, all of us who are here, 27, we were 30s, all of us who are here, we will all do the writing and make sure that we follow those criteria. So the importance of this session was for everyone to engage in this session. And then once you write your proposal, you make sure that you follow those criteria that have been presented today. And that was great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. If there is no more questions, maybe Irene, you can conclude the session and also give the chance for Gracia to make a wind up for the session. Thank you very much.
We have a hand before we conclude. We have Aidan. At least we finish everything. I hope we're not taking much of your time, Gracia. Aidan.
Hello.
Hello.
But all in all, about a proposal, I mean about abstract and something relating to some sort of research, I appreciate. Actually, you added a lot, which actually I didn't know before. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad that everybody's taking at least one thing, one important thing for their own benefit. And I hope to see many of you presenting at your local conference and at different conferences.
I see no more questions and no more hands. So thank you so much, Gracia, for coming out today. I know we have taken a lot of your time, but thank you. Thank you everyone who attended this session. As she said, I'll be sending you her PPT in PDF form through your emails. I have noted everyone who was here, so I'll send you the emails. And as she said, when you write a proposal, when you write an abstract, when you write your description, please give it to someone to review. She has been my reviewer for years now. So you can give anyone to review your abstract.
What are you doing, Galos?
So Gracia, if you can say a word so we conclude this.
So yeah, I just want to say thank you. I want to say don't be discouraged because you think writing a proposal is a lot of work. It really, when you sit down and do it, it is not. It is just a matter of planning and being prepared. And I hope that I can see many of you delivering sessions pretty soon. So if you prepare a session and you get accepted in a conference, make sure you invite me so I can go and see you and root for you and cheer. Thank you. Thank you, Irene, for the invitation. It was great to be here.
They'll start presenting in our webinar soon. They're starting this July, so I hope to see many of them.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, guys. We'll wrap this up, and good morning, Gracia, and good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Have a
Good
good
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Irene.
Good
Miss
night.
you.
Everyone, thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you a
Yeah,
lot.
I
It was a
Oh,
nice
Good night,
presentation.
yeah.
Gracia.
Good morning to Gracia. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you can open up your videos and see your face. You can screenshot it for